Hi, I'm here today to talk to Aimee Blease-Bourne, or Aimee Moonwalker, as you are today. Aimee was involved with the Stanton Moor in Derbyshire campaign when they wanted to quarry into the edges of a sacred space on the moor, which, as part of the sacred landscapes, I've asked Aimee if she'd talk to us about it. So welcome, Aimee, and what can you tell us?
Oh, hi, Steve. Thanks very much for having me here today.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know about Stanton Moor up in
Mm,
Derbyshire. It's an absolutely beautiful landscape.
it is.
Yeah, it's about 1 mile square, little piece of moorland that's got about 80 different sacred sites on there, from sort of
Mm,
stone circles to round barrows, and also rocky outcrops as well. So it's a very important time from the Bronze Age
mm,
um, onwards, really. And it's just, I find it's a very beautiful. It's got mixed. It's got the moorland sort of landscapes with the heather.
mm,
It's got the woodlands with lots of beautiful silver birch trees, and people are so very much attracted to that place, and love going up. It's really struck a chord
mm,
in many people's lives and hearts. And yeah, it was definitely worth um, protection in lots of its different ways.
mm, mm. So, as I understand it, because I know you'd written the book as well, God in Sacred Sites by Aimee Blease-Bourne, and it was a friend of mine said, "This, if you want to know about protests and protest sites, this is a book you need to read," and it
Oh,
is a
that's
really good
kind.
book. Yeah, it's excellent. Um, I think you did it as part of your degree you were doing at the time. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, in about 2009, I started a PhD,
Mm,
looking really at how to interpret sacred sites that would incorporate like the living landscape itself, not just interpreting them in a way of, oh, this was when the site was built, it was used for these purposes,
mm,
which generally we don't know anyway. So it's all conjecture
yeah.
in terms of archaeologists. But so I was really trying to look at how we could try and incorporate people's use of sacred places
Mm,
today, which are so fluid and kind of a multitude really of different
mm,
ideas that are connected to them. But what actually happened then at the time, after doing a bit of research on Nine
mm,
Ladies and kind of seeing what was happening up there with the protest site, I realised there was about a year left um, to of the protest site, because it had actually won at that point.
mm.
But there was still like signatures to be
Yeah, yeah.
signed, and the protesters were saying, well, we're not actually going to go until we know 100% sure that that it's sorted, that there will be no quarrying for
Yeah.
sandstone here. So I thought, actually, this is a great opportunity to go to the protest site and
Mm,
basically speak to the people who were living there and record the different ideas about it, and
mm,
not just from the protesters, but from the villagers, from all the people that were involved, the landowners, the police,
yeah.
the other sort of agencies that were
Mm,
linked, and the locals, actually, because they were the guys that got the protesters there in the first place. Certainly the locals from the very next village, Stanton Lees. Um, so yeah, it just seemed really an important time to um, record that journey,
mm.
really.
Yeah, yeah. I think from reading your book, there were two quarries there that had not been used for a little while, but they'd still got a time that they were granted to quarry, and they wanted to
Yes.
quarry, and it was going to come very close to the Nine Ladies circle that a lot of people who into those things they love the place as I do, and the moor itself as well. As you said, all the other all the other cairns and things around the area. Um, so I know I think the villagers were very against it.
Yeah, I think they were expecting to pull out something like three, in the initial application, it was something like 3.2 million tons worth of stone, which is absolutely ridiculous, and was definitely, the locals actually proved that that stone wasn't there. So where they got that figure from, I don't know, but yeah, I think
Mm,
um, initially it was the local village, so the one
mm,
directly next to where the quarries were going, which were saying, hang on a minute, these quarries haven't been used for sort of 50, 60 years, and there should be, because it's in the Peak District as well,
mm.
there certainly should be some sort of law to protect this, really.
Yeah.
So they went out and actually got in touch with some of the protesters who were at Basrec, that was in Derby.
All right.
Some
Yeah.
people were down there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I know.
And they connected with those guys, and then I guess out went the word then to lots of other different people, and hundreds and hundreds of people came to help. A bit of a slow start, but as the years went on, and I guess the pressure mounted as well, and there was quite a few high court battles to say whether it is actually a disused quarry or a quarry that was still in use, which of course it was classified as disused in the end, which was great, and set then a precedent for other quarries in the local area to not have this extended kind of rights that came after the war, that weren't really relevant anymore, especially after then the Peak District was classified as an area that needed to be maintained, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of Sacred Earth activism that we're doing the video for, we're concerned with sacred landscapes, and that all the land is sacred, not just, although somewhere like Nine Ladies or Avebury and Arborough and also in Derbyshire and all those places, they're all sacred in their own right, but then so could a special tree or a stream or a well, or just somewhere that you go, a special place where you like to go and be quiet and so on. So I think it's important to recognise that everywhere is sacred, and I know with Nine Ladies it certainly is still used by a lot of people as a sacred place.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Landscapes take on meaning by sort of our experiences that we have there, or our moods and things. And I think kind of we insert our ideas, emotions and things into the landscape so beautifully that I totally agree with you there when you're saying that everywhere is sacred. And I think as a society there's definitely a movement towards sort of eco-activism now, people understanding the importance of going out there to sit with a tree, like you said. And yeah, I think again on Nine Ladies we've got kind of like a microcosm of the world, really. There's so many different ideas that are attached to Nine Ladies, from the fact that it's a private moorland where the landowner can kind of do whatever he wants, really. He can encourage quarrying, if that's what, certainly in the past that's what happened, to the more sort of spiritual connections that people have up there, where they feel a deep sense of peace and home up there, and they might go up to communicate with their ancestors, or have a spiritual moment with themselves, maybe do yoga, or go up there for healing. I mean, it's got quite a few springs up there, and that water is absolutely delicious. And I think that was actually on the side where the protest camp was, which was one of the really good kind of features of that area and the site, really. We had the wood from the trees we had to burn for heat, and we had the water, which enabled a bit the sustainability of the site, really. But there's so many different ideas attached to it. That's what I always found quite fascinating, really. And I think any piece of land has that, and it's creating, I guess it's through that connection people had with Nine Ladies and other spaces. This is how I think we can try and protect the spaces from development, although that is becoming much more difficult now with sort of the new laws that hopefully won't get through, but they are.
Yes, absolutely.
Suggesting.
I know there's the new policing bill that would give people the powers that be more power to move people on, with not having so many restrictions on their power, which it seems to be a lot of people are against it. So hopefully that won't be passed. And plus there's a lot of other sites. There's the HS2 sites that we've seen, including the ones in London and the tunnels that people had, which actually reminded me of, because they had tunnels up at the camp at Stanton Moor, didn't they, as well, where people would go.
Yeah, so there was kind of like a whole massive web of defence really over the
Mm,
two sites that was split up by a road.
mm,
There was lots of tree houses, and yeah, quite a rabbit warren really of different tunnels
yeah,
that were going through the
yeah,
sites, and also the landscape really was quite beneficial in that sense. Like a few
mm,
people did make. Well, I guess there was tunnels already there, really. If you imagine,
mm,
it was an old quarry site, so you had a lot of
mm,
the heaps of stone that people
yeah, yeah,
would sort of create a
mm,
doorway into a tunnel that was already there, really.
mm,
Um, and thankfully, nobody had to go down the tunnels, or
yeah,
there was no eviction in the end. I think partly because of financial issues from the landowner, who actually seemed very he quite liked the idea, I think, of having a protest site on his land. He used to walk through the site and often would knock on the tree house's door and things and say hello to people.
oh, great, right,
Yeah, so that was Edward Manners. And yeah, and also probably because of the location and because of how it being quite far from the roads, and it
mm,
wasn't very accessible really, and it kind of
mm,
became a bit of a no-go area for the police. Um,
yeah,
so it seemed anyway, which obviously the locals didn't like
mm,
very much.
yeah,
Um, but because and also you had that the whole thing with planning, because we were coming up to a certain amount of years and people were worried that then we would have sort of residential status on that land, so
mm,
that added more and more pressure
yeah,
to the protest site.
mm,
And then you had the locals in Stanton in Peak saying, oh well, I wasn't allowed to put up a shed in my back garden, but those guys over there have put up tree houses. And
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
not quite comparable really.
No, no, absolutely, yeah. It certainly felt reading the book that it was there was a bit of a, I don't know, perhaps an uneasy alliance between the local people and the people in the camp, because I know there were some people that certainly didn't want you all there, people, local villagers, but
Yeah.
also realised that you're actually doing a lot of good.
Yeah, I think it was all depending really on the location. So the villages that were going to be right next
Mm,
to the actual quarry,
mm,
and therefore were next to the protesters, were like, yep, keep going, do your best, we are here for you,
mm,
and really supported the protesters. They
yeah,
would provide Sunday dinners, they'd provide water or
yeah,
power for people to charge their phones and batteries and
mm,
things. But then the village that was further away from the quarry and the protest site were like, oh no, this is disgusting, you're disrupting the rural idyll. um Interestingly
mm,
enough, hardly any police complaints were made, but then there
mm,
was this kind of real, I guess, moral panic against these kind of smelly dirty hippies coming and ruining our
yeah,
rural idyll,
mm,
which was totally thrown down in the High Court actually, and said, well, none of it could have happened. There's no logs of these kind of antisocial behaviors that was
mm,
claimed. um, but again, like, quite an interesting kind of case study really
mm,
um, of those different ideas surrounding it. And it wasn't really until the three villagers, as in Stanton and Peak, Stanton
mm,
Lees, and us, was the
mm,
protesters were actually saying the same thing, which was, we're not quarrying here, but you can quarry, elsewhere.
yeah,
That is when things started to move forward then. So when there was these conflicts between the groups,
yeah,
it was just
mm,
hitting a brick wall essentially.
yeah,
um which again is quite interesting really, in terms of, I guess, trying to
mm,
reach consensus as villagers, or
yeah,
as a
yeah,
community,
mm,
before then
mm,
moving things forward, because it was kind of a waste of time, money, effort and energy really, the kind
mm,
of these kind of interpersonal battles that went on kind of but
yeah,
just below the surface with the planning permissions and
mm,
things. But interesting to write about nevertheless.
yeah, I bet, yeah. So, tell us a little bit about what life was like on the camp, or when you were there anyway. What
Mm.
the daily life is, and maybe what impacts it had on your own life, previously and afterwards.
Yeah, so I just moved onto the site at kind of like the last sort of year and a half, to kind of really write about what was happening there, talk to people, interview different people, but then also get involved in taking everything down itself as well.
Mm,
So I guess the first sort of 6 months was a bit of a waiting game, really. We were waiting to see what was going to happen. We all knew in the back of our minds that it was coming, and I guess sort of kind of preparing ourselves. So people at that point were starting to think, okay, where am I going to go next? Um, as well as attending the locals at Stanton Forum meeting with other locals and the landowners, which was quite useful, really, to sort of get an idea of how it was all going to move forward, but also to hear about the summer solstice celebrations and how that was going to be policed. I think a lot of the time, for myself specifically, I just used to love being in such close contact with the top of them all, and then and kind of go up there and I guess meet loads of people who were drawn to that place from so many different backgrounds. But you know, the conversations you'd have on a daily basis with people up there was absolutely fascinating. So I guess that the kind of, and you know, we would have site meetings as well to kind of try and work out some sort of exit strategy. But I think as the time went on, really sort of going into the last 6 months of time up there, it became a lot more emotional for myself, even though I'd only been there for a short period of time, but certainly for the people who we were starting to say goodbye, really. And people were, you know, we were having work parties coming over to help us, and we were really getting kind of stuck in, really, to just taking away the things on the outsides. You know, like the tree houses that weren't in use anymore. We were starting to think, okay, well, if it's not being lived in, we know there's this kind of end date coming, you know, certain things have been signed, and it was just basically starting to think, right, where do we start? What's the plan? How do we take things away but remain defensive in some ways as well, so that we're not just kind of exposing the land just in case, you know? So we still had that element of suspicion, really. But like I say, it just started to get very emotional. We had lots of visitors coming to sort of say their goodbyes to the place and the different structures that were up there. But when we were actually taking the different places down, it was really interesting to work on the land. And then, you know, your mind gets so used to seeing certain things in the landscape that you know, it just becomes very natural with the benders and the tree houses and things. And then, you know, we take it down, and a lot of the places wouldn't take too long to take down, to be honest. They were empty and things. It was more the structural. And then you pop it in the back of the trailer and then sort of turn around and do that last look. And it was just absolutely beautiful to see and hear and feel a different space. You know, like we had completely removed that sort of humanity out of that landscape again, and you could hear different noises, like a little stream that maybe you weren't aware of before, you know, or I don't know, you would just, I remember somebody taking some rope off a tree and just almost feeling like the trees were just breathing a sigh of relief. And I think that was a really beautiful moment that kind of happened again and again. And it was all like, oh, this is the last time that this will be happening. This is the last time that, you know, we'll be having a fire in this spot. And so, it was very emotional, but you know, what a wonderful sort of opportunity for us all, really, everyone that went there, to be so close to such a beautiful landscape, you know, and create a home there.
I mean, some of the structures that they had there, because obviously there's quite a lot of them were up in the trees, and you had like walkways between the trees and things, you know.
That's right.
You know, with the two ropes. I saw a picture of one. Was it a caravan up in a tree?
Yeah, the beast. That's right. And there was quite a few different sort of bits going on in that area. And there was a tunnel there as well, and kind of, you know, trying to create distractions and things. It was very I guess because the protest site was there for so long, there was a lot of opportunity. I think it was 10 years. There was a lot of opportunity for people to come and kind of put their stamp on it, really, and get involved as much as they wanted to.
Did they ever get people who came there perhaps for the wrong reasons, shall I say, you know, who just wanted to party, or not there's anything wrong with partying, but people who weren't there really to save a sacred space, but were just there because it was a camp and because it was an alternative lifestyle.
Yeah, I guess there was that element of it, but I think the thing about probably spaces like that is they are on the fringes of society, and for whatever reasons, these people, feel attracted to it and maybe need to escape their own reality for a bit. I would always hope that it would be quite a grounding experience for people to, I guess, get back to basics and kind of interact with the different protesters. I always felt it was very much a vibe of, we don't care what's happened in the past with you, we don't care what's kind of gone on in your past, it's what we are doing now that's important. And that seemed like the kind of big, like a mindfulness, I guess, that in terms of welcoming people in, that okay, you're here now, let's do this together. But yeah, I do think there was definitely that element. But hopefully those people went away with, like I say, some sort of grounding, maybe a bit of healing, because if they're drinking that water, if they're sort of immersing themselves in that kind of space. I guess in the last year there wasn't that many new incomers.
No.
While I was there, it was more, I guess people were leaving really more than coming.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I could necessarily answer that question.
it must, people must have formed some quite emotional, strong relationships over the time they were there, especially the people who were there from the beginning.
Yeah, and there was quite a few. Yeah, there was quite a few that were there right from the beginning all the way through. And they had that initial, when they moved there in, say, I don't know, 2000, and the idea was that it was always going to be a very temporary thing. And then each year that went on, I won't plant any seeds, I won't plant a garden for next summer, because we probably get evicted, we won't be here. So there's always this real transient, temporary nature. But I think a friend of mine who lived up there said to me, after about 4 years of being like, no, I'm not going to plant any, she then decided, no, this year I'm going to plant. And she had 6 years worth of growing. Good. Then.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, really, that kind of idea of being somewhere temporary.
I guess that's sort of the transient nature of the camp and what was happening there.
Yeah.
I guess it could either be, for some people it could be worrying that what's going to happen, but I guess in other ways it could be quite freeing as well. The fact that all the other things that aren't so important don't matter anymore. What matters is what we're doing here.
Yeah, that is definitely the understanding I got. A lot of the people up there didn't define themselves as pagans at all when I spoke to people in that last year. But I saw them as they were pagan eco warriors. That was my understanding of what they do. And the fact that they were willing to put their life aside for this amount of time, for these trees, this landscape, for the locals, for other people that want to come to the Peak District to enjoy that place. That kind of mentality, I don't know. Obviously I lived there for a year. I was living in a bus. We had, a fair amount of luxury in some ways. But I don't know if I could personally deal with that temporary nature. I kind of like my roots in a home. So, massive respect to people that can do that. Like you say, it must take some immense guts, really.
Yeah, of course. There's similar things happening down with the road expansion around near Stonehenge, with the camp there and people trying to stop the tunnel going ahead. It must be, I guess, having the friendship and camaraderie of sitting around the fire and being almost feeling like a part of a family there, living there rather than thinking I'm coming here for a few weeks. This is where you live,
Yeah. And it's just much more of a simple way of life as well. Really, your day jobs are things like, well, I need to collect wood so that I've got the fire. I need to collect some water. And I think that's what Nine Ladies really, I guess for me, it just slowed down life in terms of just looking for those basics. What are we going to eat? Can we do some foraging to for the berries, or there's some beautiful wood sorrel around Nine Ladies and other kind of wild things, and you know, if there was roadkill, people would often
Yeah.
eat that as well. So it just gets you, I guess, seeing life in a very, very different way, and perhaps something a bit more authentic to, I guess, like when people were building Nine Ladies or Stonehenge, you know,
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
more land
Well, yeah.
based,
Yeah.
and also nature really dictated what activities or things we'd get up to. I remember that, I think there was about 3 months left on the protest site, and the snow came, and it came for about 4 weeks or so, and you know, not just a little bit of snow. I mean, this was sort of
Yeah.
a good couple of foot, you know, Peak District snow,
Mm.
and it did stop play, but it started play as well in the same way. We couldn't necessarily go up the trees to collect stuff, but we found that using car bonnets to put bits of wood on, then we could use it as a sledge and basically pull loads of stuff down the hill.
Yeah, I could
And
imagine that.
sledging itself.
Yeah, I bet that was quite fun as well. Yeah, to do.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. So just having,
Yeah.
interestingly, you know, and when it was raining, so nature really impacted everything that we, like it does to a certain extent, you know, if you're living in a house and things, but it was even more so, really, you know. So it was fascinating in that sense.
Yeah, I guess you were more susceptible to the whims of nature, and whether, you know, what it was like and what you could do. I mean, now you can go out in a car or public transport or whatever, and you don't have to think, I'm not going to be able to go there today because there's snow on the ground, or it's, you know, there's a really strong wind blowing, which I guess in the trees it must have been. I think somebody, I think it was you, somebody said something about it almost rocking them to sleep when it was windy in the trees and it was swaying. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, in the book, someone said that.
Yeah.
No, total respect for the people that were living up in those trees. You know, some of them were really high up, and the sort of architecture of the stuff was quite fascinating as well. Like you say, the kind of network or sort of web of ropes and things in the tree down on bottom side, where there was kind of like then a seat in the middle of this web. Was very, very fascinating. And I think also then the protesters being there created an idea up Nine Ladies on top of the moor where the stone circle is, where people were visiting irrespective really of the protest site, but it certainly impacted the way that people were viewing Nine Ladies. And it certainly did for me. I remember going up to Nine Ladies in 2000, and I knew there was a protest site there. I was been told when I was up there, and it kind of created this, oh wow, well, what you know, what are people protesting for, and this must be a very, very special part of land, you know. And even though, like you say, every bit of land is sacred and should be protected and celebrated, it really just emphasized this is a very special piece of land, and what is it, you know. And that's what started my fascination, really. Why are these people here? Why are people wanting to quarry here in the first place, you know? How could that even be? It's such a beautiful landscape. So I think it set people's minds possibly looking at places in a different way. And then, you know, if you drive around the Peak District, I mean, it's full of holes. Some are absolutely devastating to see, and, you know, to be around. And maybe it got people thinking about that in a different way as well.
I guess it made people be more mindful of the land they were walking through, rather than just walking through it, being really aware of, you know, these trees are here, these stones are here. What happens if they're not? What will it look like? You know, we can't get them back. You know, if once they're gone, they're gone. You know, so
that's a really good point.
Yeah, it sounds as if it was quite a good thing going on between yourselves and nature, in that you said that the tree seemed as if it, when they took the structure out of it, it's almost as if the tree breathed, but it actually tolerated you all being there, and maybe in some extent welcomed you being there because you were doing something to save the place.
Yeah,
you know, I think
so.
Working with nature would certainly be a lot better way of going forward than trying to use nature.
Definitely. And you know, big respect to all the people that are at the Stonehenge camp at the moment. Hoping to get down there soon to visit everybody.
Yeah.
It's still going on. This is the thing, isn't it? You think, you know, it's great that Nine Ladies, the battle was kind of won. I mean, there was a compromise essentially. They decided that you know, the quarries that we were protesting against were dormant, so they couldn't continue to have planning permission for there. But they did unfortunately just move across the road and extended one that, okay, yes, it's a much less sensitive site. It's not next to the moor as such, but it's still only, you know, 500 meters from the other site.
I did see another quarry site when I went up there last week, the week before, and I usually go up from the what you might call the main entrance to the moor, where most people know. But this time I went round the other side, and walked up the hill through the woods, and I saw a quarry that was looked a fairly small place, but a quarry that was actually in use then. So maybe that's it.
I mean, it's quite ironic, really, because really the moor itself has been it's been used for quarrying for hundreds of years. Really, I think it's in the book. There's an image of the moor like an apple core, and on the top you've kind of got Nine Ladies, and then all round the top there, it's been sort of dug into by the quarry manufacturers, and it's quite an interesting. It's ironic in a sense that now those disused quarries have actually become a very beautiful habitat, you know, and kind of create our experience of what Nine Ladies and Stanton Moor is like now. You know, it creates these different sort of micro landscapes, which is absolutely beautiful now. But of course, back in the day when we would have seen them, it would have been absolutely awful.
It doesn't take long for nature to reassert itself once humans leave it alone and go away. It doesn't take long for things to grow back again, which is good.
And also the devastation that the quarrying did cause to the archaeological sites up there. You know, first off, you've got the antiquarians who came and kind of took everything out of the sites themselves, and you know, dug them up and damaged quite a large proportion up on Stanton Moor, including the Nine Ladies. And then, you know, the quarries came and basically took a lot down themselves and didn't really care that they were in the way. Thankfully, that can't happen now with the protection with English heritage. But or can it? Because, you know, you've got down at Stonehenge, which is just proving that there's a World Heritage site there that's bigger than just the stones themselves. Yet they think it's acceptable to dig a massive tunnel, which is
the site goes across to further into Avebury and all over the plains, and there's so many beautiful barrows, and the King's Barrow and things, and the old King's Barrow, and lovely places, and very spiritual feeling to the places as well. I think there's, to me, you can feel that it's been used for special things, whatever those things were. It's, you know, it's certainly something that's worth preserving. And it's not just the tunnel that they want to put under Stonehenge. It's also the fact that the tunnel's not very deep, and they're going to have to dig up massive amounts of the plains, Salisbury Plains, and everything around there, for making compounds and access roads to build it. It's not just, well, they're just going to move that road a bit over there. It's going to have and every time they do any digging, they're finding more remains, more things. It's one of the most important sites in the world, and they want to do this to it. It's just incredible.
You just wouldn't think it would be able to happen. I mean, Stonehenge was kind of left to the people, really, and then English Heritage have kind of took it up, but they aren't doing a very good job of protecting it, in my opinion.
No, they're not.
And, you know, the restricting access, I think it's absolutely disgusting. You know, it should be a free site to whoever wants to go, and managed in a respectful way for the different people that want to use it and view it and interact with that space. You know, it can be done. We've just got to think outside the box, I think, in terms of the management side of things. You know, I don't necessarily agree with loads of people having, you know, a party and not respecting the archaeology. I think that respect can be taught. I think it's all about education.
Absolutely.
You know, and trying to create interpretation that stories around the landscape that can inform us about our behavior, just like was done in the ancient times and things. I think we really need to almost go back to go forward.
Yeah, I think it links into some extent with what we were talking about Nick Hayes and his book of Trespass, and about so much of the land is locked away from, we can't go in it, or we're not supposed to do. And people worry about, well, if they change this, anybody can come walking into my back garden, or all over my farmland, and that's not what it's about at all. It's other countries. Scotland, I think, has a much more advanced way of looking at this, in that most places are open for access, certainly far more than we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is it. Stanton Moor, actually, just going back to that, was it's only been enclosed for about 200 years. And before the Enclosures Act up there, so the Enclosure Committee came to mark out the space of enclosure for Stanton Moor, but they were actually met by a mob with holding sort of forks and pickaxes and things, and told to go and never come back, because you are not taking this piece of land from our community, because it was a common. Stanton Moor was just 200 years ago. But unfortunately, I think as time passed, whether that generation had gone, and that passion wasn't there, they did get enclosed in the end. But then, of course, as the enclosures came in, that was then when the destruction of the site started happening. Not just, like I mentioned, the antiquarians who were digging up the sites and damaging them, massively. But also the quarrying itself. So, people think, oh, the enclosures, it created private property, which meant people were protecting these spaces more. Well, not on Stanton Moor, that was not the case at all. It's led to more devastation. And unfortunately, a lot of people worry now about visitors to Stanton Moor and how they're impacting, especially at the summer solstice. It does attract quite a lot of visitors during that period of time. Partly, I think, because Stonehenge became so controlled, and people wanted to have an experience of kind of wilderness, and Stanton Moor gives that a little bit of an illusion because it's away from the main road and things. There is a big problem with litter up there. During that sort of period of time. So me and a group of some of my friends have set up a Guarding Sacred Sites network. It was basically set up last year because somebody went up to Daltor, another little circle down from Nine.
I know it,
below Stanton Moor, and rearranged some of the stones. And I was wondering if I needed to report it, if it had been reported at all, but found out that people didn't. Although it had been spread all over social media, nobody had actually reported it to the Peak District.
Right.
So then I set up this group and made sort of flyers and posters and telling people how to report different things, so that the archaeologists can go back then and kind of put it back to how it was originally placed. And since then, we've been doing loads of litter picks, probably about once a month. And generally kind of keeping in touch, people sending in images of any damage or litter, so that other people can potentially go up and pick the site up. And I think it's really helping. We've got locals involved, and pagans, other sort of people. So that's moving forward quite nicely, and we're hoping to get in touch with the landowner, although he seems he doesn't really want to. Well, my understanding is that he doesn't necessarily want to promote the site and sees anything like that as a kind of promotion. But what we're trying to say is it's about education, actually. We want to make sure there's a group of people up there, really at all times, to kind of educate and help people understand why not only this part of the land, but, why nature is important. Full stop, and how we can care for it, because that kind of understanding seems to have shifted on a little bit for us nowadays. People, when I was growing up in the 80s, you would never dare drop litter. That was just not done. But I guess we've become more of a throwaway society. There is just generally more litter, more plastics. So just trying to get that message across, really, and to have a presence during the solstice, which is generally left people to just get on with what they want to do. It's not really policed as such. There is
Yeah.
police there sometimes, but
Mm.
yeah, just to give people an idea of why it's so important to us and to everybody, really.
It's good to know that there are still people guarding sites like this, and I'm sure there are similar things at other places, and there's nothing stopping anybody, if there's a local site that's special to you, not necessarily a sort of a sacred as in a holy site, it could be all sorts of things, as we said, but if there's something there, there's nothing stopping a group of people protecting it. I know a lot of little villages and towns at the moment that I know have started doing regular litter picks with local people.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be better if people didn't drop the litter in the first place, but at least there are people there trying to help if it happens,
Yes, absolutely. I totally
as you
agree.
said, I never would have dreamt of, and I don't now, as a child, of dropping litter. And I was taught that you respect nature, you shut gates, and why you have to shut gates because of livestock and things, and that you don't drop litter. And well, what do you think is going to happen to that piece of that plastic cup you've dropped on the floor? So people could even just, sometimes I just take a plastic bag in my rucksack when I go for a walk somewhere, and if I see bits of litter, collect it, take it in, drop it in a bin. Everything helps.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea, and almost getting that into our minds now. If we're going for a walk, take a bag, take a glove or whatever, just so that if it's there, and kind of be a bit more mindful of the idea that, okay, we don't want to see rubbish around these beautiful places in nature, but it is there potentially, and if we all helped and did our little bit like that, it would soon go down. And also, trying to it's education, I think, isn't it? I think there needs to be a concerted effort, really, through local authorities and the government. Really, it just doesn't seem to be tying their agenda. They're more about destruction and devastation, aren't they, really, unfortunately? So it's down to the people, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's getting people to realise that it's their land.
Yeah.
No matter what legalities say or the enclosures and things, it really is a community's land in their area, and to perhaps be more involved in some ways with it, and realising it's their land and thinking, well, no, I'm not going to accept people doing this to this land. It's wrong.
Yeah.
And the Stanton Moor thing has certainly showed what a group of people who were dedicated parts of their lives, in fact, to protecting it, what they can do. I mean, when I was up there the other week, I was talking to an old gentleman, the only other person I saw that day, and he was talking about what happened in those times. He lives on the other side of the valley, as he put it, towards Darleydale, and he said that, talking about the protest camp, he said, yeah, they did a good job of protecting this place. He said there were a few people that weren't too sure, and they told us that when they left, they would leave no trace. And he said, and they made a really good job of that as well. He said, you can't tell, nature's taken over, and you can't tell there was ever a protest camp or any kind of camp there. So
no, and that's great to hear. When we did a final walk around the site with the Peak District Park and the landowners and the police, they actually said, the Peak District Park Authority representative said, this is probably the cleanest part of the Peak District right now, because we went through, with a fine tooth comb, with magnets, large magnets, just making sure we got every single bit of anything up.
Wow, yeah.
And what a total honour that was as well. It was devastating then to go back in the summer of that year to then find that somebody had just left all their camping gear on one of the sites that we'd cleaned. But obviously we tidied that back up, and just a constant fight. But no, I think that was the thing. We did say we were going to leave. It was very difficult to leave, but we did do it.
Yeah.
In
so
the end.
How do people access this guarding sacred sites? I know you've got a Facebook page, haven't you? Is there any other places?
Yeah, it's all on all the major sort of sales places on Amazon, although I don't want to necessarily advertise for Amazon.
No, yeah.
But yeah, if you type it into Google, it comes up with quite a few different options there where you can buy it from. Guarding sacred sites, the 9 Ladies Anti-Quarry Campaign. And yeah, hope you enjoy. There should be another book coming out fairly soon. And we've also been creating some meditations based on Nine Ladies.
Oh wow.
On a YouTube site with my friend Cheryl.
Yeah.
On a YouTube page called You Army. So it's YOU capital RME. And yeah, we've got a couple up there, different I guess our interpretations, and that then become a meditation. So that people, we actually made it during the last lockdown, because we really wanted to. I certainly wanted to go up. I wasn't allowed, living too far away nowadays. And so we thought, well, it would be great to create kind of a place in our minds where we can go and visit. So yeah, there's a couple of bits on that YouTube page that you can go and visit.
Good.
That are all sort of Nine Ladies related. Some prayers also to the Stonehenge activists that are there right now. Just sending love out really from the Nine Ladies.
Yeah, wow. I'm sure they'll be very, very happy about that. They're a wonderful bunch of people, as I'm sure you all were back in the old days.
Back in my day.
Yeah. So, right, well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about, Aimee, today? Or
I think that's about everything, Steve. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's been really good to talk with you. And I'm sure people, when they watch this video, will enjoy it as much as I've done.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.